We've all done it. Tapped an app for food delivery or hailed a rideshare. These services are everywhere, and they're all built on this really attractive promise of freedom and flexibility. But what's the real story behind the gig economy? It seems like for some people, it's this amazing path to being your own boss, but for a whole lot of others, it's a much, much more complicated journey. So today, we're going to look at both sides of that coin. And really, it all boils down to one huge question, right? Can these gig jobs actually replace a full-time career? I mean, can they really provide the kind of stability you need to support a family? That's the big one. Let's dig into what the stories and the data are telling us. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the appeal. I mean, what is the promise of gig work that pulls in millions of people? It's really built on this powerful, super modern idea of what a job can even be. And that promise, it really stands on three big pillars. Number one, flexibility. You get the freedom to set your own hours. Number two, quick income. The ability to just start earning money fast. And number three, and this is a big one, the irresistible idea of being your own boss. Finally escaping that 9-to-5 grind. It's a really compelling pitch, especially if you're in a tight spot financially. So, the key word here is autonomy. It's all about that feeling of control, right? That independence to decide when you work, where you work, and for how long. You could argue this is the single biggest selling point of the entire gig economy. And this idea of autonomy, well, it gets packaged and sold as empowerment. The platforms will tell you they're giving people total control over their work lives. But, and this is a big but, as we're about to see, the true nature of that control is exactly where things start to get complicated. And that really brings us to the perfect metaphor for the gig economy. It's a double-edged sword. For every shiny promise of freedom, there's this hidden, sharp edge, a complexity that you don't always see coming. Yeah, the reality is just not always so simple. The glossy marketing, the slick ads, they often cover up a much tougher situation. So let's peel back that layer and see what's really going on underneath. And this right here lays out the central conflict perfectly. You've got the promise on one side and the reality on the other. So you're promised flexibility, but the reality is often zero security. You're told, be your own boss, but in reality, you're under algorithmic control. And that promise of empowerment, well, it can quickly turn into some really precarious, unstable conditions. Okay, so let's dig into that precarious reality a little more. What are we talking about here? What are the actual hidden costs that come with doing this kind of work? Well, for starters, it often means you're trading a fixed salary for pay that's completely unpredictable. You're giving up job security, you're giving up health insurance, no paid leave, no sick days, all those safety nets that, let's be honest, most of us in traditional jobs kind of take for granted. And on top of all that, you end up with very little real control. And that brings us to this really important word, precarious. It just means uncertain, insecure, unstable. Think about it. So many gig workers are living in this constant state of not knowing what their income is going to be next week, or even what it's going to be tomorrow. And that lack of control is absolutely crucial, because instead of a human boss, workers are basically answering to an algorithm. A piece of software is deciding how much they get paid, which gigs they get offered, what their rating is, and if you think the system got it wrong, good luck. There's often no human you can even talk to appeal the decision. This can lead to something called algorithmic bias. Basically, it means the automated system itself can start spitting out unfair results. So if you're a worker, it can seriously feel like the app is working against you, Controlling your jobs and your pay for reasons that are totally invisible. And this gets to a really serious concern here. Think about it. The companies are making the profit, but it's the workers who are shouldering all the risk. We're talking about their car maintenance, gas, insurance, all of it. This massive imbalance, it really raises a fundamental question about what's fair. And in this context, that kind of imbalance, it has a name. It's called exploitation. The argument from critics is that this great promise of flexibility is basically being used to hide a system where workers' labor is being used unfairly, all for the platform's profit. Which brings us to another huge issue, underemployment. This is when someone might be working like crazy, putting in tons of hours, but the money they're making still isn't enough to actually make ends meet. It's like they're running on a treadmill, and sadly, this is a chronic problem for so many people doing gig work. So, okay, we've talked about the definitions and the data, But what about the human cost? What does it actually feel like to live this reality, day in and day out? Well, this quote says it all, doesn't it? At the mercy of algorithms and customer readings. It just perfectly captures that feeling of complete powerlessness. Your whole livelihood could hinge on a customer's bad mood or some random change in the app's code. The irony is, you're not in the driver's seat, even when you're literally the one behind the wheel. And this one? Living hand to mouth. This hits right at that financial instability. It means you're earning just enough to get by, and that's it. There is no safety net. So one surprise car repair, one unexpected medical bill, and it's not just an inconvenience, it's a full-blown crisis. And finally, burning the candle at both ends. This one is all about the pure exhaustion. Just to make enough money to survive, so many workers are forced to put in incredibly long hours. We're talking about working to the point of complete burnout, all just to cover the basics. So, wow, if this is the reality for so many people, where do we go from here? What's the path forward? Is there a way to keep the good parts, that flexibility, while building a system that's actually sustainable and, fair? Well, the general agreement seems to be this. The gig economy isn't going anywhere. But for it to truly help the common person, it absolutely needs to change. In its current form, it's just not a sustainable long-term option for the very people who make it run. And that call for change really comes down to three key things. First, we need stronger regulation to make sure people are treated fairly. Second, better protections for the workers themselves, treating them less like disposable contractors and more like the essential workforce they clearly are. And finally, we have to build more equitable systems that actually value the workers' contribution, not just the company's bottom line. And all of this leaves us with one last really important question. And this goes beyond just economics or policy, it's more fundamental. It's about us. As we sit here and tap our phones to order food or get a ride, what is our responsibility to the actual human being on the other side of that screen? What do we owe the people who deliver our food and drive us home?